Even against the towering spectacle of the US Army, two things the Germans had in spades: courage and a dogged determination to fight to the very last bullet. We are familiar with the strategic or larger battles of World War II, the Blitzkrieg or Lightning War with which the Germans took Europe, Operation Barbarossa, the epic battles over Stalingrad or Berlin, D-Day. But what of the tactical battles, the unknown skirmishes and field maneuvers? I'm in one such place, Herrnberchtheim, a small village in Franconia, northern Bavaria, where such a field battle took place. Herrnberchtheim was first mentioned in 1180 when it was controlled by Graf von Berchtheim and his knights. Herrnberchtheim is small now and was small back in World War II. It's surrounded, as you can see, by agricultural field. It's stunning. It was here that the overwhelming numbers and resources of the American invasion or liberation force fought against fragments of the once mighty Wehrmacht. The German forces were utterly overwhelmed, desperate, tired. They lacked just about everything: food, munitions, diesel, air cover. But even against the towering spectacle of the US Army, two things the Germans had in spades: courage and a dogged determination to fight to the very last bullet.
And as we rise high into the air with the Klovekorn the Relic Hunter aerial drone, we of course approach the current day village of Herrnberchtheim, taking the same path as the American soldiers did when they attacked it. And the closer we get, of course, we can see there the railway embankment which the Germans used as a last-ditch defensive line.
I have read historical accounts which describe German resistance here in the last months of the war as almost non-existent. Some historians state the Germans had no will to fight, had no will to defend National Socialism, that the Americans were hailed as the great liberators, freeing the Germans from a punishing and evil regime. Is that the truth? Did the German villagers greet the Americans with flowers? Did the weary German soldiers raise the white flag at the first opportunity? Certainly not.
The best source of truth comes to us from the very veterans themselves. Their accounts make it very clear that there was very strong resistance here in these dying months of the war across Franconia and Bavaria.
The US Army was heading southeast, having fought their way through France from Normandy, through the West Wall. The 12th Armoured Division, consisting primarily of the 17th Armoured Infantry Battalion and the 23rd Tank Battalion, was heading for the prize, Nürnberg and München. Opposing them was Kampfgruppe Dirnagel, the 79th, 212th, 352nd Volksgrenadier Division, the newly formed Panzerkampfgruppe 13 from Horbe, and a battle group of the 2nd Mountain Division, all very fragmented bits and pieces scrambled together to form one last defensive line here in Franconia. The Battle of Herrnberchtheim is unknown, and this is what makes it attractive. It has not been soiled by some precursory Hollywood fiction or Allied written German school text on history. It's pure. It was here where the last lines of defense were made. It was on this soil that the Germans made their valiant last stand. Old men, women, and even children of the Hitler Youth. In desperation and defiance, they huddled together on the western ridge of the railway embankment of Herrnberchtheim, just over there. Stephen Fritz, in his book Endkampf, writes, Operating on the left flank of the 23rd Tank Battalion, it was the men of the 17th Armoured Infantry Battalion who, on April the 3rd, ran squarely into SS troops at Rodheim and on the outskirts of Herrnberchtheim. Now began a 9-day period of intense fighting as German forces fought doggedly to prevent an American breakthrough of the defensive line. Ordered to take the town at 6 in the evening, Sergeant Karl Leons of A Company placed the trucks and attached tanks of the 1st Platoon into a V formation and headed cross-country towards this village of a few hundred people. A group of enemy infantry retreating from Rodheim was seen off to the right in a small set of woods, Leons noted in his diary, and we gave them a going over according to him, but we bypassed the woods and moved against the town. There are many reasons why the Germans with limited resources could mount resistance. One was the quality of their leadership. Kampfgruppe Dirnagel was headed by Obersturmführer Rudolf Dirnagel. He was a Nazi Party member. He joined the SS in 1931 at age 19. He rose through the ranks, achieving membership of the SS Totenkopfverband Thüringen, receiving the SS Honor Ring and Honor Sword. Another reason may have been that word had spread that the Americans were in fact executing prisoners of war against international treaty. According to issue 81 of Siegrunen by Richard Landwehr, a publication in the USA, many captured members from Dirnagel would be executed in captivity by the GI, in inverted commas, liberators. Large numbers of Waffen-SS POWs were murdered on the spot by members of, in inverted commas, the greatest generation, none of whom had to answer for these blatant war crimes. Now, I'm not sure whether that's correct or whether that's just hearsay. However, I do know that the Germans here had plenty of reason to fight. Another reason was that, let's not forget, National Socialism was the state that they'd grown up with. The Nazi regime had gained power in 1933. They'd been in power for over a decade. And Nazism, well, its homeland was right here in Bavaria. It had all started in Munich. So this is the homeland of National Socialism, hence its more rigorous defensive line. I'm on my way to the ancient graveyard of Herrnberchtheim to see if there's any sign of the heroes of World War II who died here.
Author Stephen Fritz in his book Endkampf writes, "The Panzerfaust made deep demands on one's reservoir of personal courage, for a Lanzer had to lie in wait or approach stealthily until a tank was at point-blank range, rise suddenly to fire the one-shot weapon." A veteran of the 12th Armoured Division remembered the fanatical Germans who hunkered in foxholes with Panzerfäuste at the roadside, ready to die for the chance of knocking out just one tank. They crouched between pine tree roadblocks until our tank guns blew them away in white flashes and splinters. They dug lines of fortifications that were target practice for our artillery. Their lunatic heroism ended torn or dead. The futility of the resistance notwithstanding, in 3 weeks of fighting in Middle Franconia, some 300 American vehicles fell victim to Lancers wielding the Panzerfaust.
I'm now at the local town church, and this is actually a Lutheran church. It must be one of the first Lutheran churches in northern Bavaria of its type. There are only 2 memorial stones here, one for World War I directly behind me, and of course one for World War II. I'm now at the western edge of town, and it's easy to understand once you're here why Kampfgruppe Dirnagel chose this as a last line of defense. This railway embankment has a thickness of some 25 meters. It's a fantastic area for a defense. The book, the 17th Armoured Infantry Battalion Historical Information, states, "The 17th Armoured Infantry Battalion's drive eastward through the Odenwald was relatively unchallenged until its armour came out of the wooded mountains and approached the region of the Tauber River. Germany had recruited very young troops for a line of defence in that region. These boys, many 16 years old, carried small arms and a Panzerfaust anti-tank rocket. They were backed up by some 88mm and other high-velocity anti-tank guns. The desperate and fanatical young Germans, with their weapons, were able to stop the 17th Armoured Infantry Battalion armoured columns temporarily." Now, this railway embankment may have been a pretty good interim cover for the Kampfgruppen. However, one can see just by traversing this area that from a strategic military viewpoint, it really was a last-ditch effort. Things were pretty rough at the Wehrmacht and with the SS. Things were out of control. The US forces were advancing rapidly with their mighty reserves and resources. A much better position you can see just behind me. That is Frankenberg, or the mountain of the Franks, and that ridge line of course presents a perfect natural barrier which would have been very difficult for the US Armoured Corps to go through. But the Wehrmacht and the SS didn't have a lot of options. They were often encircled, they were often outflanked, and had to make very quick tactical decisions on the run. And this railway embankment was the best they could do in this area. And while I'm here, I may as well do something useful like feeding the locals. Hello. I know. No. There's a little one. The train is coming in. Here she comes. I'm doing my metal detecting, and while I was here in the fields doing my detecting, I met this lovely lady with horses, and I was even invited to her house. Very impressive old building from 1920. She said that her father fought in the war in the Jungvolk when he was 10, and also that her grandfather served. She then told me a story about someone who, during the after the battle, was captured, and this is a Wehrmacht soldier, and he had a beautiful gold watch, and according to her at least, or the testimony of her grandfather, the Americans chopped his hand off to get the gold watch. Now, I don't know whether that's a true story or not, but what it does tell me is that there's some people here in this village that still have very strong sentiments from that era. Now, the reason why I've stopped here is because as we were coming down this pathway, in fact was the horse that I shot earlier, and a lady said that in this Gestrüpp, which is German for bush, there's a bit of a legend of a mysterious cellar. But no one's game to go down there, and I can see why. I'll show you in a minute. It's a pretty average place to be. So I guess that means I have to go and have a look. I'll ditch the go find. See if I can find an entry spot into here without getting, oh, this is pretty disgusting. Alright, in here somewhere, you've got to be kidding me. wonder nobody goes down here. Somewhere here there's meant to be a cellar. Alright, look, I'll try from the other side. Oh, I don't believe it. Well, I do believe it, because I can see it in amongst these very prickly bushes. Is indeed. Oh, these things got thorns on them. Ah, the local legend is not just a legend, it's fact. There is indeed some sort of, I'm not sure what it is, wall bunker, ammunitions bunker. Not even sure if I can safely stand on this thing. Looks reasonably secure. Oh, this wouldn't be so good if I fall in here. Some sort of vent. Oh yeah. I'll keep investigating. Well, this is incredible because I'm right on the western ridge of the railway embankment, having spoken to a local lady who's given me the tip off of this place. I'm down here and I can already see at a distance some World War II items. Okay. Alright, let's keep going. Surely not. Okay, this is definitely a World War II era standard issue Wehrmacht bedpan type deal. Very nice. This could even be a German standard issue jerry can.
That stands for War Department. That's essentially British copy of the German jerry can.
Betreten dieses Raumes mit Licht ist nicht gestattet. Check this out. How cool is that? Betreten dieses Raumes mit Licht ist nicht gestattet. That means if you are not allowed to enter this room smoking. I guess that's just answered my question as to what would have been in here. Clearly explosives. So I've discovered the entrance to what looks like some sort of bunker entrance. Doesn't look like much from the outside, but check out the inside. It's something down there, most definitely. And that I might leave for another day. Extraordinary. On the front line. Taken some time, and it's so dense here I can't even use a normal metal detector. I just have to use to pinpoint it wherever I go. And I seem to have found a kind of a graveyard for, I don't know what it is yet, but judging by the way it's looking, it's Wehrmacht stuff. I mean, it's just terrific. Look at this stuff. This is everywhere. Okay, so in amongst the treasure trove, I found a original Frühlimonade, early issue Wehrmacht type drink, F-R-U, Früh or Früh, not sure, not seen one before. Okay. this thing, which is either something benign or something exceptionally cool. Maybe a speaker of some sort. And again, this sort of beautiful pot. KB STB. Need to do some googling on this one. Anyway, there's stuff everywhere here. I've been bitten more than I'd like to pretend, and it's time to call it a day.